Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Ethan Barlow bought his slice of the mountain, he thought he'd finally found peace. But when a nearby HOA declared war over view rights, his sanctuary became a battleground. What began with a letter ended in courtrooms, arrests, and one man standing firm against the madness. I never bought the mountain to be left alone, but I sure as hell didn't buy it to share. 760 acres of rock, pine, snowmelt, elk, and silence. That's what I paid for, in full, after 22 years flying rotorcraft and dragging survey equipment through some of the most miserable terrain Uncle Sam could find. I earned every acre. North Hollow Acres wasn't just a farm. It was my line in the dirt. I'd been on the land a year and some change when I decided to install the gate. Nothing fancy, just steel posts sunk into bedrock, a wide gravel turnaround for trailers, and a solid iron gate with a keypad box. I coded it myself. No HOA, no traffic, no trespassing mushroom pickers, or lost tourists trying to off-road in Subarus. Just me, my 2 border collies, and the ridgeline. The gate went up on a Thursday. On Sunday morning, I found a printed letter stuck in my mailbox inside a manila folder. No postage, no envelope, just bold header, Timberline Vista Community Association, Land Use Notice. The opening line made me choke on my coffee. As a portion of your land appears to be within the ecological and visual impact zone of Timberline Vista, the association requests coordinated access for scheduled events, conservation monitoring, and future development considerations. Please provide three full sets of keys and/or gate codes for ongoing use. No signature, just K. Bradmont, president at the bottom. I'd seen the development down below, cookie-cutter cabins slapped together on the lower slope, all painted forest sage and marketed as eco-luxury retreats. Their idea of nature was visible from a hot tub with Bluetooth speakers. Mine was having to dig post holes around bear scat. I laughed out loud, tucked the letter into a drawer labeled absolute bullshit, and sat down to draft a formal response. It was short, blunt, and printed on my old U.S. Geological Survey letterhead. North Hollow Acres is private land, held in fee simple, outside the jurisdiction of any HOA, including Timberline Vista. No shared access exists, implied or granted. No keys will be provided. Any unauthorized entry will be considered trespassing under Colorado revised statutes. I signed it, dropped it in their communal Dropbox by their mail kiosk, and thought that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I got a knock on my door. I opened it to find a woman in her late 50s, pin-straight blonde bob, hiking boots that had never seen mud, and a clipboard like it was surgically fused to her arm. "You're Mr. Barlow?" she asked. "Barlow," I corrected. "You the one who wrote that nonsense?" She didn't even flinch. "Karen Bradmont, president of Timberline Vista Community Association. We just want a collaborative relationship with neighbors who share the visual and ecological interface." "Visual interface?" I blinked. "You mean the fact that you can see my fence when you squint real hard from your master suite?" She smiled like I'd handed her a puppy. "Exactly. That view is part of our community character. You don't want to negatively impact that, do you?" I leaned against the door frame. "Ma'am, I own this land. Your HOA means jack up here. You've got no easement, no common border, and definitely no jurisdiction. Now, unless you plan to buy my entire mountain, cash up front, we're done here." Her smile stiffened. "We'll see what the county assessor thinks." She walked off. I shut the door and stood there for a while, staring out of the window toward that perfectly manicured forest of prefab homes. I'd dealt with all kinds of bureaucrats in my day, rangers, developers, Army Corps, and at least 2 senators. But something in Karen's tone wasn't just entitled, it was rehearsed, like she'd done this before. It was 2 days later when I got the first real taste of what Timberline Vista thought counted as a collaborative relationship. I was working on replumbing the water line to the livestock trough when my phone buzzed, motion alert from the front. Gate. I wiped my hands on my jeans and pulled up the camera feed. There they were, 3 adults, late 40s to 60s, crammed onto a mud-splattered ATV like clowns in a golf cart, bumping up the gravel switchback that led to my entrance. They rolled to a stop just outside the gate where my steel signage read, "Private property. No trespassing. Armed response possible." They stared at it for a good minute. Then one of them, A guy with a Timberline polo and too much sunscreen on his nose got off the ATV, walked right up to the keypad box, and tapped at it like he expected it to wake up and greet him. Another one, a woman I didn't recognize, pointed past the gate and said something about a trail. I tapped into the gate's two-way speaker system. "You're on private property. Turn around and leave immediately." They all froze. The man looked up at the speaker. "This is common access," he shouted. "Karen says the trail here runs through HOA land." I smiled. "Well, Karen's wrong, and you're being recorded. Sheriff's en route. You've got about 10 minutes to make better choices." The woman raised her phone like she was filming. The third person, a portly guy wearing Oakleys and carrying what looked like a clipboard, barked something about community pathways. I didn't even answer that one. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and gave my address. The dispatcher recognized my name and said a deputy was nearby. By the time I drove down on my side-by-side, they were still loitering by the gate. I stopped on my side of the fence and just watched them. The deputy rolled up maybe 6 minutes later, blue strobes flashing against the trees. He stepped out calm and casual. Deputy Alston, solid guy with boots older than the HOA. I walked over to greet him. He nodded. "Got yourself some lost hikers." "More like legally confused trespassers," I said, nodding toward the gate. He talked to them for a good 10 minutes. I didn't hear every word, but I did catch snippets. Private land. No implied easement. Yes, even if it's a dirt road. In the end, he issued a trespass warning to all three of them, wrote it up on his notepad, had them sign it, and let them know that the next time, it wouldn't be just a warning. As they got back on the ATV, I made a point to wave. "Be sure to tell Karen the mountain still isn't for sale." The clipboard guy glared at me. "She has a map." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I've got the deed. And a federal survey stamp. Let's see who draws straighter lines." They peeled off back down the hill, their little engine buzzing like a pissed-off hornet. Deputy Alston stayed a minute longer. "They always like this?" he asked. "New HOA, built 3 years ago." I said, "They think view rights means ownership. Welcome to Colorado," he chuckled. "Well, if you get any more unauthorized visitors, call us. Camera footage?" "Recorded and backed up," I said. "Want a copy?" He gave me his email and said he'd appreciate it. "Best to start the paper trail early," he added. When he left, I stood alone at the gate for a while, looking down toward the timberline homes scattered below like plastic Monopoly pieces. The trees were thinning between us. Their development pushed higher every year, eating into what used to be forest. I'd hoped the gate would be the end of it. Now I had the growing feeling it was just the opening volley. And Karen, she wasn't just some nosy neighbor. She was playing chess. I figured Karen would regroup after the sheriff's visit, maybe even pull back. Most people flinch when they realize trespassing comes with actual paperwork and badge-carrying consequences. But Karen wasn't most people. She was the kind that doubled down. 3 days later, I got served. I was working the north pasture, fixing a broken irrigation riser, when a Jeep with county plates crept up the gravel road just outside my gate. A man in khakis and a windbreaker stepped out and hollered my name like it was a polite ambush. "Mr. Barlow." "Depends who's asking." I called back, standing with a pipe wrench in one hand. He introduced himself as a process server from the county court, handed me an envelope with a neat plastic seal. "Consider yourself notified," he said. "Temporary injunction, Timberline Vista Community Association v. Barlow." I signed the delivery slip. He didn't wait for small talk. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and opened the envelope. It was a formal petition for injunctive relief. Karen was asking the court to grant Timberline Vista emergency access and legal review of disputed property boundaries based on alleged mapping discrepancies and community harm caused by non-cooperative perimeter development. The map included in the filing was a bastardized mess. She had redrawn the ridgeline, literally redrawn it. According to her map, my access road didn't follow the original Forest Service fire trail. It cut clean through what she now labeled HOA Visual Stewardship Corridor and ended in a pink shaded zone marked Shared Maintenance Access, pending. I stared at it, blinking in disbelief. She even added a phony stamp in the corner, Preliminary Plat for internal use only. If I hadn't spent a lifetime reading survey maps and coordinating terrain ops with satellites and LiDAR overlays, I might have believed it. But I had something better than Karen's Google Earth Photoshop special. I had federal maps, topo quads with seals, Original land surveys with registry coordinates I'd signed myself as a federal geodetic tech. And I had a damn good memory of what this mountain looked like before HOA banners started sprouting like weeds. By nightfall, I'd already called in a favor from an old colleague, Vince Elroy, licensed cadastral engineer with a reputation for eating HOA lawyers for breakfast. "You got a fraud claim on your hands," he said after I emailed him the documents. "That plat she submitted, that's a Class A forgery. Who approved it?" "Nobody," I said. "She just submitted it." "Even better. We'll countersue." The next morning, Vince drove up with his gear and a drone kit. We spent the day confirming every original marker and boundary post. Granite monuments, metal pins, GPS coordinates, all rock solid. Meanwhile, I filed a response to the court, motion to dismiss with prejudice, and an accompanying civil complaint against Karen Bradmaint and the HOA Board for fraud, document falsification, and attempted encroachment. I attached copies of official federal maps, including 2 that bore my signature and USGS stamp, dated from my active service years. We also forwarded everything to the sheriff's office. Vince insisted we get ahead of it. "She's setting up a public narrative," he said, "trying to make it seem like the land was always theirs and you're squatting on HOA territory. You let that stick, even a little, and it'll cost you in court. Or worse. Appraisals, taxes, liability." I nodded. I knew how this game worked. If you don't challenge the lie early, it grows roots. That night, I stood on the overlook near my barn, looking down at Timberline Vista's rows of porch lights twinkling like a strip mall on life support. I imagined Karen standing on her deck with a glass of white wine, thinking she was winning. Let her. I wasn't just a landowner. I was the one who drew the maps she was trying to rewrite. I didn't expect peace after filing a fraud complaint, but I figured Karen would at least simmer down while her HOA attorney scrambled to explain how a preliminary plat got submitted without any legal basis. I was wrong. She escalated, this time with a hammer. It was around 2 in the morning when my phone lit up. Motion alert, gate camera. I blinked myself awake, expecting maybe a raccoon or deer to trigger the sensor. Instead, I saw headlights, low and deliberate, crawling up the gravel road in near silence. Then a figure stepped out, all in dark clothing. Short, stocky, hooded. At first, I thought it might be some dumb teenager on a dare. But the figure carried something heavy, metallic, and went straight for the gate controls. I sat up and zoomed in. It was a woman, blonde, no doubt in my mind. Karen. She was holding a cordless demolition hammer, industrial, the kind you rent by the hour from contractors who assume you're not insane enough to use it at night on private security infrastructure. I watched, jaw clenched, as she jammed the spinning head into the keypad housing. Sparks flew. Plastic shattered. She kept going, hitting the hinges, kicking the base, muttering to herself like a possessed raccoon with a vengeance. But my system was better than she expected. As soon as the casing cracked, the internal alarm system pinged, not just me, but directly alerted the local sheriff's substation. And the camera. She didn't even look at it. Too focused, too angry. I slipped on boots, grabbed my rifle, not to use it, but for comfort, and waited inside. The road up to my cabin isn't fast, even for emergency vehicles. 20 minutes at best. But knowing she was caught live in high resolution made it easier to breathe. When the deputies arrived, their cruisers lit up the trees like Christmas morning. I heard shouting, then boots crunching gravel. I opened the door just in time to see Karen being walked to the back of a cruiser in handcuffs, her demolition hammer dangling in an evidence bag. She didn't look at me. Her face was blank, not angry, not scared, just detached. Like she'd been sleepwalking through the whole thing. One of the deputies, same guy as before, Alston, shook his head as he approached. "You got the footage. Already emailed, multiple angles. You're gonna love the slow-mo." He sighed. "We're charging her with property destruction, trespass, and tampering with a security device. Might go federal, depending on whether your gate system qualifies under agricultural protection statutes." "It does," I said. "It's registered. I filed the form last year." He gave me a tired smile. "Then she's cooked." I watched them drive her away down the mountain road, lights fading until only the stars remained. I stood in silence, the cold creeping through my sleeves, the acrid smell of burned plastic still lingering in the air. The next day, I replaced the gate's hardware with an upgraded steel-cased keypad, fully encrypted, and ran a redundant power line under the gravel. I also mounted a new sign. Trespass, arrest. Trespass twice, jail. Trespass with tools, felony. And just for good measure, I added a floodlight with motion tracking that could light up half the valley. By noon, the news had spread. A neighbor texted me a screenshot of the local blotter. Local HOA president arrested for alleged vandalism on Mountain Farm property. Apparently, she'd told deputies she was investigating obstruction of access for fire mitigation review. Sure, Karen, at 2 a.m. with a demolition hammer. I didn't laugh. Not really. I just got to work documenting everything for the DA. This wasn't some rogue outburst. It was desperation. She'd tried legal fiction and lost. Now she was trying brute force. And I had the receipts. Karen's arrest shook Timberline Vista harder than a bear wandering through their 4th of July picnic. I expected outrage or silence, but what I got was chaos. By Monday morning, my inbox was full of emails from names I didn't recognize, residents of the HOA itself. Some furious, some embarrassed, a few apologetic. The best one read, "Dear Mr. Barlow, I do not condone Ms. Bradmont's actions. Many of us were not aware she submitted any filings on behalf of the HOA regarding your land. I'll be voting to remove her from the board immediately. It was signed Mason C, Unit 12. I pinned that one to my fridge. But the war wasn't over. At the preliminary hearing 2 weeks later, Karen showed up in a beige pantsuit with a smug expression like she was receiving an award. Her lawyer, a brittle-looking man with a voice like a fax machine, argued that Karen believed she had fiduciary responsibility to investigate boundary encroachments for the good of the community. He said the gate had been illegally obstructing a previously open route used historically by hikers and service vehicles. I nearly laughed in court. Historically open, it had been closed since I bought it. And before that, it was a collapsed logging road from the 1970s, long before HOA McMansions rolled in like termites. My lawyer, Cynthia Daly, calmly presented the footage of Karen attacking the gate, her forged plat maps, and sworn affidavits from Vince confirming the integrity of my boundary markers. The judge didn't need long. "This is not a zoning dispute," he said, looking over his glasses. "This is a case of an HOA attempting to assert imaginary jurisdiction over private land using fraudulent documentation and now criminal behavior." He denied their injunction, said their plat had zero legal bearing, and was an attempted misuse of community authority. Karen didn't blink. She just stood there, like she still didn't believe she could lose, like reality hadn't loaded yet. But then Cynthia made her move. "Your Honor, we ask the court to take judicial notice of a civil complaint filed this morning against Ms. Bradmont and the Timberline Vista HOA for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, attempted boundary fraud, and misappropriation of HOA funds for unauthorized survey activity." That got Karen's attention. Her mouth twitched. The judge nodded. "Duly noted. We'll set a hearing." The courtroom emptied like someone had pulled the fire alarm. HOA members were whispering in hallways, and Karen walked out stiff as stone, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd just found out their credit cards were maxed out. Later that day, I got another letter, this one from an HOA whistleblower, anonymously typed. It claimed that Karen had diverted HOA funds to hire a private survey firm without board approval and had altered the invoices to look like landscaping reports. There were copies of receipts, bank transfers, notes she left for their treasurer. She'd spent over $12,000 trying to redraw a line on a map that had existed since before Colorado was a state. I handed it over to Cynthia and Vince. Their eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This changes everything," Vince said. "Now, it's not just about your land. It's about embezzlement, abuse of governance, and misrepresentation to financial institutions. The whole HOA is liable unless they remove her fast." Cynthia was already prepping a motion to compel internal HOA audits. The HOA, in trying to assert dominance over a farm it never owned, was beginning to turn in on itself. All I had to do was watch it unravel. The storm broke not with a bang, but with a memo. 2 weeks after the hearing, I got a letter from the county clerk's office notifying me of a formal request to re-examine jurisdictional boundaries related to shared-use mountain corridors. The applicant, Timberline Vista HOA. Attached was a scanned letter, signed, dated, and sealed by a junior staff attorney from the county zoning board. Karen, it seemed, had submitted a revised jurisdictional proposal claiming that due to visual and ecological entanglement between my land and the HOA's greenbelt, The county needed to revisit parcel integration under sustainable community land. Cohesion. I had to sit down after reading that phrase. That was some next-level HOA buzzword bingo, but it wasn't just noise. This filing meant one thing. Karen, or someone acting on her behalf, was still trying to push a legal pretext for encroachment, hoping someone in zoning would take the bait. I drove straight to the zoning office with Vince and Cynthia. The county staff was helpful, if flustered. A junior planner named Leo showed us the file. "It's highly irregular," he said, flipping through papers. "She submitted it under the HOA's name, but we don't even have a record of board approval." "Because she didn't get one," Cynthia said, deadpan. Vince leaned in. "Did she submit any maps?" Leo nodded. "These." He slid across a set of laminated diagrams. I recognized them immediately. Variations of the same doctored plat Karen had tried to use in court, now relabeled as preliminary eco-overlay proposals. Only this time, they included my barn, my well, and even part of my southern pasture under a green hatch labeled Timberline View Protection Zone. I swear I saw red. "You realize this is fraud," I said. "That's my damn property. These aren't proposals. They're lies." Leo raised his hands. "Hey, I'm not defending it. We flagged it for review. No action was taken, but she was aggressive. She called 3 times. Claimed she was correcting a historical error. Vince asked for copies of every document submitted. Leo obliged. Back at the ranch, we scanned and cataloged every page. Cynthia prepared a cease and desist addressed to the HOA and to the county, demanding a halt to all reviews based on fraudulent submissions. Vince filed a formal complaint with the county recorder's office, citing misrepresentation of property lines. But Karen wasn't finished. That Friday, I came home from hauling hay to find a clipboard nailed to one of my fence posts near the southern trailhead. On it was a notice, laminated in plastic and stamped with the Timberline Vista HOA logo. "Attention! This area is under review for ecological alignment with the Timberline Vista Preservation Zone. Entry may be subject to community review and recreational scheduling." She'd essentially declared eminent domain by printer. I took it down, called the sheriff again, and added another incident to the file. Deputy Alston chuckled when he saw it. "She's slipping into fantasy now." "No," I said. "She's building a paper trail, hoping someone somewhere will take the hint." But the good news. HOA members were starting to talk. I heard from a woman named Elise who served on the finance committee. "She's lost it," Elise said bluntly over the phone. "She forged my initials on a landscaping contract. I'm stepping down, but I'll testify." Cynthia nearly jumped out of her chair when I relayed that. We added Elise's statement to the civil case. More affidavits followed from a former treasurer, a board member who'd resigned, even a contractor who claimed Karen pressured him to install survey monuments on land she couldn't legally enter. The walls were closing in. Karen hadn't just tried to take my land. She'd done it by poisoning the HOA from the inside out, and now it was starting to bleed. The next blow came from an unexpected direction inside the HOA. A certified letter arrived one morning, hand-delivered by a private courier in a pressed blue blazer who looked deeply uncomfortable being on my land. I signed for it with one eye on his car, which he'd parked backwards, ready for a quick getaway. The letter bore the Timberline Vista HOA letterhead, but this time it wasn't from Karen. It was from their acting vice president, a man named Peter Langford. Apparently, after Karen's second arrest and the court's rejection of her forged plat, the board had quietly placed her on administrative suspension pending internal review. The letter stated, "Mr. Barlow, we are formally requesting a mutual de-escalation process and a temporary allowance for access through your lower trailhead for community fire evacuation drills and risk assessments." There it was again, wrapped in politeness, but still a demand. Cynthia read the letter 3 times. "They're trying to salvage PR and legal position. It's a bait offer. If you agree, they'll argue there's a precedent for shared use. They can drill their own fire exits," I muttered. She nodded. "We'll respond politely and decline. But I want you to be ready. If they're pulling her back, they're trying to shield themselves from the liability storm she created. It means they think she's going to burn." And burn she did, because 2 days later, Karen filed a counter-lawsuit against the HOA. She accused them of dereliction of fiduciary duty, abandonment of defense strategy, and complicity in external slander, alleging they had undermined her authority during critical legal negotiations. Cynthia stared at the document like it had personally insulted her. "This is amazing," she finally said. I didn't get it at first. "Barlow," she grinned. She just sued the HOA over the fraud she committed while leading it. She's now admitting she acted on behalf of the HOA, while the HOA is trying to claim she went rogue. This is going to force discovery. Financial records, emails, board minutes, everything. The HOA was forced to hire independent counsel. Their insurance provider got involved, and suddenly HOA board members started flipping like pancakes. Cynthia called a deposition hearing. Elise, the former finance committee member, testified under oath that Karen had pressured her to approve fictitious invoices for boundary protection services. One contractor admitted he'd been paid in cash, off the books, to stake flags along my pasture line, flags he later removed when he realized the land wasn't HOA managed. Vince and I made a detailed site walk, flagged every tampered marker, photographed everything. The sheriff's office called 2 days later. Karen was now under formal investigation for criminal misappropriation of funds, filing false public documents, and aggravated trespass. And, just to ice the cake, a local news outlet finally picked up the story. The headline read, "Mountain HOA implodes as president faces fraud, charges over land grab." They included drone footage Vince had volunteered, of the untouched wilderness on my property, overlaid with the ridiculous HOA eco-overlay map that claimed a preservation corridor included my horse troughs. People started reaching out. Other property owners near HOAs. A lawyer in Boulder who wanted to use my case in an HOA reform seminar. Even a county supervisor quietly emailed, asking if I'd be willing to speak about landowner rights abuses in HOA-permitted communities. I wasn't looking to be famous, but I wasn't about to stay quiet either. Karen had tried to bury me in paperwork, trespass, and lies. She didn't realize she'd handed me a shovel, and I knew exactly what to do with it. The audit report dropped like a boulder off a ridge. It came from the independent forensic accountant hired by Timberline Vista HOA's new legal team, and it was damning. The executive summary alone read like a white-collar horror story. Unaccounted withdrawals totaling $1,700 from HOA operating reserves, unauthorized vendor contracts with non-licensed survey firms, falsified board approval records, illegal disbursement of community funds for unapproved boundary operations. Cynthia got a copy before it even hit the full board. She scanned it, eyes narrowing with each paragraph. This isn't just HOA overreach. This is organized misuse of funds and documentation fraud. You know what that means? More jail time, I guessed. Multiple statutes, wire fraud, criminal conspiracy, and if we tie it to federal land use programs, interstate fraud. I leaned back in my chair, coffee untouched. She tried to annex part of my land using fake maps. Now she's annexing herself straight to prison. But the real satisfaction came that Friday, when we got confirmation, a grand jury had approved an indictment. 7 charges, 2 felonies. Karen Bradmont was to be arraigned the following week in district court. Meanwhile, the HOA collapsed in slow motion. 3 more board members resigned within 48 hours. The treasurer released a public statement denying all knowledge of financial abuse and threw Karen under the bus so hard I think the tires left a bruise. Residents of Timberline Vista started petitioning to dissolve the HOA entirely or place it under external management. I got calls from 2 families who apologized for ever voting for her, and another who asked if I'd consider selling a small slice of my land to create a buffer zone. I politely declined. The final straw came Sunday morning. I woke up to find a dusty, beat-up pickup truck parked just outside my gate. A handwritten sign was taped to the windshield. "Mr. Barlow, I'm sorry, we were lied to. I never wanted this." Unit 7. Beside it was a small cooler with a dozen fresh eggs and a paper bag of peaches. No signature, just goodwill wrapped in quiet shame. I took the cooler, left a note that said, "Apology accepted. Stay off the gate." That week, Cynthia filed our amended civil claim, now totaling over $110,000 in damages, legal fees, and punitive claims for harassment, trespass, and attempted land misappropriation. Karen's personal assets were already frozen. Her cabin in Timberline was listed for sale within 72 hours. Rumor was she was trying to flee the state, but the court had already flagged her passport and she was out on pre-trial supervision. And just when I thought it couldn't get more poetic, the HOA's website was taken down. In its place, a simple white screen with bold black letters. This community is under external review. Contact county administrator for inquiries. No branding, no rules, no Karen, just silence. Up in my ridge, I sip my coffee as the sun spilled across the valley, the gate rebuilt stronger than ever, the key code changed weekly, the motion lights still worked, and the cameras rolled 24/7. I wasn't gloating, not exactly, but I had defended what was mine, with law, with patience, with fireproof documentation, and a touch of righteous stubbornness. And I wasn't done yet. Karen's trial opened on a Tuesday, under a sky so clear it almost felt ironic. Cynthia and I sat in the third row of the courtroom, a few feet behind the county prosecutor's table. Karen entered flanked by her lawyer and two marshals, her expression stiff, her once perfect blazer slightly wilted. She looked like someone who still believed the HOA might show up to save her. The prosecution started with the basics: misuse of funds, falsified records, trespass. Then they moved to the highlight reel, literally. Vince's footage played across two courtroom monitors, showing Karen, under cover of night, slamming my steel gate with a handheld jackhammer like she was mining gold. You could hear the courtroom gasp. The prosecutor paused the video. This is not an act of oversight. This is premeditated sabotage of private security infrastructure on land to which the defendant has no legal access. Karen's lawyer objected, citing lack of proof of personal intent. Cynthia whispered, "Wait for it." The next exhibit? Karen's own emails, pulled from HOA servers. The subject lines alone were enough to bury her. Land behind our development should be reassigned. Rural parcel interfering with community planning. We can muscle this one. County records are weak. The jury didn't even blink. Then came the financial records. Elise's testimony, the contractor who admitted to being paid in cash to plant flags just to scare him. The zoning officer who confirmed Karen submitted forged overlays under official HOA letterhead. The prosecutor rested. The room was still. Karen's lawyer tried spinning it into a misunderstood civic duty, but by day 3, even he sounded like he was asking for leniency rather than acquittal. On the 4th day, the judge took over questioning. He asked Karen directly, "Did you, or did you not, knowingly submit false cartographic information to a zoning authority representing land you do not own?" Her voice cracked. "I believed the documents reflected community interest. Answer the question." "Yes, I submitted them." Boom. That was it. The jury came back in under 2 hours. Guilty on 5 counts, 2 felonies, 3 misdemeanors. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month, but the judge revoked her bail immediately. They cuffed her right there in the courtroom. I watched her walk out the same way she'd marched into my driveway 9 months ago. Full of certainty. Only now, the only thing she'd be presiding over was her bunk in county jail. That evening, I stood at the edge of my land, watching the dusk settle across the timberline. The gate, reinforced, coded, camera-wired, stood silent and immovable. My boundary, my right, etched into maps and law. I wasn't the kind of man who needed revenge, but justice. That felt different. I didn't toast or cheer. I just stood there, quietly, listening to the wind move through the trees, as if even the forest was exhaling. 3 weeks later, I was back in court, this time for sentencing. Karen sat motionless at the defense table, dressed in a beige jumpsuit that looked as uncomfortable as her posture. The room was filled with press, HOA residents, and more county officials than I'd ever seen in one place without donuts involved. The judge was firm. He cited her sustained campaign of coercion, document falsification, and trespass, her abuse of community trust, and the fact that she never once admitted wrongdoing. Then came the sentence: 6 months county jail for criminal trespass, 5 years probation with 2 years supervised, and a court order banning her from holding any position of fiduciary authority in any HOA or nonprofit organization for a decade. But the civil side, that came later. HOA Timberline Vista, now under external receivership, had no choice but to settle. They cut me a check for $110,000, plus a written public apology, posted in every mailbox, stapled to the community board, and emailed to every resident. Mr. Ethan Barlow's property was never within our jurisdiction. We recognize the harm caused by the actions of our former president and affirm that his rights were violated. Timberline Vista HOA formally renounces any claim, current or future, to his land or access thereof. It ended with the line, We are not, and never were, entitled to his land. That felt better than the check. I used part of the money to build a solid 8-foot timber wall along the Southern Access Trail, where Karen's ATV crew had first tried to cross months ago. The gate was reinforced steel, keypad locked, with motion-triggered floodlights and a new sign that read, Private Mountain Range, Entry Prosecution, HOA free since 1884. As a final move, I converted my old barn into a land rights workshop, where I hosted monthly classes for small ranchers, homesteaders, and anyone dealing with overreaching HOAs. Cynthia helped me design the curriculum. Vince helped put up the projector. People came. Dozens. Some from as far as Utah and Wyoming. One guy from Oregon drove 16 hours straight just to sit in on a seminar about defending land titles against rogue associations. I didn't think I'd ever become a speaker on private property rights. But maybe that's how mountains make men. They don't ask if you're ready. They just stand and wait for you to rise. Karen eventually moved. Word was she left Colorado entirely and tried to change her name. No one heard from her again. As for Timberline Vista, it remains under county control. Rumors swirl that 40% of its residents have filed for de-annexation from the HOA entirely. I wish them luck. Every spring I still walk the ridgeline with my GPS in hand, just like I did back when I wore a badge for the feds. Except now, I walk it as a man who owns every inch beneath his boots, by right, by title, and by fight. The sun hits my land like it remembers, and so do I.